Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and reminding you, you can get the Codist, second edition, now out on Kindle. It's either $2.99 or $5.99, depending on what hour of the day it is. You can't ever tell with them, but it's out in Kindle and paperback. And I know many of you have been waiting for the second edition to come out. It is now out and available. Also, I want to encourage you to go to our website, ignitingnation.com, and scroll to the bottom of the page. Click on the cover of the new book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. Give us your email address and we'll give you the first chapter for free. And everybody who has read that first chapter has been gripped by these powerful lessons learned from the Tree of Life. It's my pleasure to introduce you to a fellow Eastern European bloodline neighbor, Romanian-born Chelsea Patterson Sobolik, author of Longing for Motherhood, Holding On to Hope in the Midst of Childlessness. Chelsea has worked for the U.S. House of Representatives on issues such as child welfare, religious freedom, adoption, and foster care policy. She was adopted as a newborn from Bucharest, Romania, grew up in North Carolina, and then graduated from Liberty University. She has written for the Gospel Coalition, 9 Marks, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and the Pathos Evangelical Channel on a wide variety of topics, including culture, current events, and Christian living. She and her new husband live in Washington, D.C. Chelsea Patterson Sobolik, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
I love your story of your adoption. I'm an adoptive parent.
That's wonderful.
The birth mother was 15 when she was pregnant. She got pregnant 16 when she delivered my daughter. That's 28 years ago. And wow. You became a part of a family that you were born under the Ceausescu regime, which was a vision which is opposite to what China has, which China punishes you if you have a second child.
Too many children.
Right.
Yeah.
Ceausescu wanted to increase Romania to become a world power. And he did that by an edict, a mandate that mandated young women to get pregnant.
Yes.
And your birth mother was a victim of that mandate.
She was 19 years old, unwed mother who, so in Romania, if you did not have a child by a certain age, in this communist nation, you would be brought in by the government for questioning. Why aren't you pregnant? Why don't you have a child? And then you would be given another year, and then your family would be fined a celibacy tax.
Right.
Which communist nation, no one had any extra money, so all these babies were born. And yes, my birth mother was unfortunately a victim of that evil decree.
You know, people don't remember.
No.
They don't remember that he was executed.
Yeah, on Christmas Day.
Yes, they don't remember. I'm much more tuned in and sensitive to Eastern Europe because of the Jewish population.
Yes.
My Hungarian roots, my roots from southern Poland and western Ukraine, and my connection to Israel, which is very, very deep because of my Jewish upbringing, and then my coming to faith in Jesus, which just adds a completely different dimension to all of this. But your story, while you were being adopted, you had a brother adopted who was what, 7 days, 10 days?
11 days.
11 days apart, so you were almost raised as twins.
We basically were twins, and super fun. I write about this in the book, but it's so funny because my parents got married in their 21. They were so young, and they got married. they were not believers, and when they got married, they did not want children.
Right.
And I think it's so funny because they have 6 children now. They adopted 6, but when they got married, that was actually part of their conditions for getting married, where children were not going to be a part of their story. And they became believers a couple years into marriage, but still didn't really want children. And it's so funny how the Lord, just as time went on, just laid that desire on their hearts, and they ended up in Romania. So,
it's fascinating to me because I read your book and so related to the story and to this couple that was so committed in the beginning that it was almost like a premarital condition.
yes, it's so funny. Yeah.
And here they are now with how many children are there total?
There's 6 of us.
6 of you.
Yes.
And the family that God puts together, and what people don't really understand of why foster care and adoption are so incredibly important. Right now, today, there are 34 million orphans living along the Ganges River. 34 million. So when we talk about children needing foster care and children needing adoption in countries around the world, it's a huge problem. Yesterday I had the privilege of interviewing the hospice mama. She takes hospice babies home.
Oh my goodness.
And
oh my goodness.
she nurtures them until they pass.
Oh.
And can you imagine? And she says there are roughly 400,000
Wow.
in need of that kind of touch, that kind of nurturing. It is a huge situation, and I was very fortunate in my adoption story. You have a very classic during that season of how European adoptions were being done, but then they passed a law of no longer could there be
foreigners,
foreign adoptions.
Yeah. So my parents, there were 2 of us adopted from Romania, and then Romania changed their laws, and my parents wanted to adopt again, so they switched to Russia, and the rest of my siblings are Russian, which Russia has since passed a law of just playing politics with people, but Americans can't adopt from Russia any longer. So
and China,
and China, yeah,
and China as well.
It's so fun. My aunt and uncle adopted 2 years ago, and they adopted a little girl from the Ukraine. So Eastern Europe is very well represented in our house. The Olympics are a fun time.
I'm sure the Olympics and soccer.
Yes.
Are things that Americans don't understand the European passion for soccer, but it is, I believe, the largest spectator sport in the world.
Yes,
is soccer. Let's talk about you growing up. You have now a family. They were not believers. They were doing this. This adoption was out of pure compassion.
So, sorry, they became believers before they adopted.
Okay.
But it's such a funny, God writes such interesting stories, but they were in the process of a domestic adoption that was just taking forever and a day. My mom had actually had a miscarriage, and they were struggling. And so they're in the middle of a domestic adoption process, and my dad is an architect, and his business partner called him and said, "Hey, there's a 2020 documentary on the Romanian orphans. You guys should watch it." And he almost dismissed it until my mom's sister called her and said, "There's this program this Sunday night. I think y'all should watch it." And so they watched it, and it was on the Romanian orphans and the orphan crisis in Romania. And the Lord just put it on their hearts of that's where our children are going to be from. So almost 30 years ago, it was a lot easier to adopt internationally. So 5 weeks later, they were on an airplane with a one-way ticket to Romania, and they were there for about 6 weeks, doing the adoption process for me and my brother Nicholas. But yeah, so I grew up with always knowing. Everyone's first question is, "Did you know you were adopted? Did you? Was it this big surprise at age 18?" But we all knew we were adopted, and my mom homeschooled all six of us, so she definitely deserves some crowns in heaven. But yeah, it was great. I love, like you said, I love adoption. I love getting to help, like you said, raise awareness. There's such a big need, and it's a big passion of mine. I've gotten to work on adoption and foster care policy in Congress, and just kind of helping shape some policies and write and talk about it. I really, really care about it. So,
it's interesting that in the natural, a young man and young woman who can conceive do conceive. There's no background checks. There's no FBI investigation.
I know.
There's no fingerprinting. There's no local law enforcement. There's no orientation, foster care training, none of those things. I had to go through all of that, and on top of that, spend about $35,000,
Yeah.
which to have a child outside of adoption or foster care, it's just you pay the deductible.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So it's almost a punitive system that makes you work even harder.
Yeah.
To take care of what the Bible says is true religion, is
Commands us to.
taking care of the widows and the orphans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you say your mom miscarried before.
She did. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then did they choose not to have or continue to try to have any more children biologically, or?
Yeah. They chose to start the adoption process.
Okay. But a lot of times, many times, an unusually high percentage of time, as a matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
A couple will go through the adoption process and wind up pregnant.
Exactly, I know. Yeah.
Which is kind of God's way of saying, once you've released it into my hands, I've taken care of it, and I'm going to give you a double portion.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
As you began to look at your adopted life, it made you unique. It made you special. If your parents raised you anything like I raised my daughter, it's a source of pride for her. It's not a tragic story of abandonment and rejection. Why didn't they want me, and why would somebody leave me? It's a story of God picked, a great dad for me, and this is my daddy. She actually has my feet, and we look almost exactly alike.
Yeah.
So when there's a picture of the two of us together, they can say, "Oh, I would see from a mile away that that's your daughter." And
it's so funny.
And we just shake our heads and go, "Yeah," and we never say, "But she's adopted."
Yeah.
Because she, once the paperwork is done, she's no longer adopted.
Exactly. She's your daughter.
She's my daughter.
Yeah.
And this predicating it by calling this is my adopted daughter. No, this is my daughter. Mm-hmm. My name is on her birth certificate. I am her father. But we take a great deal of pride because we always laugh when people say it, and then it ultimately winds up, well, why are you laughing? And the story comes out.
Yeah, I love that.
Your mom homeschooled you. There were 6 of you.
Yes.
all adopted. So they had quite an investment made in, first of all, bringing you all together. Over what period of time? What's the age span, and what was the span of the adoption period?
Yeah, so I'm 27 and our youngest is 18. So it's a 9-year difference. And it was probably over the course of 6 to 8 years that the family was brought together. They didn't adopt. So Nick and I were 4 when they started. They adopted a little boy from Russia, and then they adopted a little girl from Russia, and then the last adoption they adopted 2 girls. So yeah, two boys and 4 girls.
So, was there any language issues in this process?
So we were all infants except for my sister Elena. She was 6 when she was adopted from Russia, came over only speaking Russian. And this is such a funny story. So she's 6 years old, picked up on English really quickly. And she had gotten in trouble one night, probably 8, 10 months into being in our family, and she gotten in trouble, so she got sent to bed early. And my mom walked by her bedroom and she heard her like complaining about getting sent to bed early, but she was complaining in English, not in Russian. And my mom knew if she's spewing her like deepest, most intimate thoughts in English, then she's switched over. So
She switched over.
we always laugh about that story.
That's great. Now, in your Bible studies, in your homeschooling, what, did you all have curriculum that you used, a standard curriculum?
My mama was a teacher before she adopted all of us, so she knew somewhat what she was doing. But there's a wealth of resources out there for homeschooling families and whatnot. So yes, we definitely had curriculum, and we're part of co-ops and stuff like that. So
okay, so what you Bob Jones, Abeka, all
Abeka, yeah,
okay, Abeka, there you go. Okay,
the standard,
the standard ones, but
Yeah.
gave you a strong enough education that you went on to Liberty University.
I did.
What made you decide to go to Liberty?
So it's actually really funny. I did not want to go to a Christian school at first. I thought I've been homeschooled. I'm kind of ready to spread my wings, widen my horizons, and did some research and visited Liberty actually, and just fell in love with the campus and realized that my college years are still formative years as far as worldview and my mind being shaped, and ultimately made the decision to go to Liberty to continue getting a good worldview foundation on higher education issues. So went there. I studied international relations and graduated 2013, and loved Liberty. I have a little brother there now, so we love Liberty in our family.
Now, your topic, Longing for Motherhood, you talk about a topic that in the Bible is referred to as barrenness. And there were a number of barren women in the Bible. But you just got married a couple
6 months ago.
6 months ago, and you've authored a book about longing for motherhood. Now, somebody would say, well, wait a second. The numbers don't add up. She's been married for 6 months, and she's published a book on infertility. Either she was extremely promiscuous, or she wound up with a medical diagnosis that came at a time that was just not expected.
Right. It is the latter. So, and it is very unique. My story is very unique. Like you said, most people walk through a season of infertility or miscarriage in the context of a marriage, and I walked through the heat of my journey when I was 19. But I started at 18, just a long series of doctor's appointments and whatnot. I won't go into too many details, but there's some medical issues I was figuring out, and I was also a freshman at Liberty at the time, and I had a doctor's appointment in August, and they told me, we think this is what could be the realm of possibilities. Just prepare yourself. One of the possibilities is you might not be able to have kids, but we don't know for sure. So I went back to school and just completely dismissed it out of my head, just trying to be a normal college freshman. But I had my final doctor's visit the week of Thanksgiving, which the irony in that is just, looking back, is just very interesting, I think. But anyway, I went to the doctor's office, had my appointment, and they, at the end of the appointment, told me that I 100% would not be able to have biological children. And as you can imagine, that's devastating news for anyone to experience, much less a teenage girl to experience. So it really, it wrecked me at the time. And I grew up in a Christian home, grew up as a Christian, and thought, okay, I have two pathways here. I can either completely walk away from the Lord and throw my hands up and say this is too hard, or I can wrestle with God and wrestle and see what the outcome is. So I went to the Christian bookstore pretty soon after I found out, and the only resources I could find were there's like one book on the topic of infertility or one book on miscarriage. And I thought, those don't describe me. I get the point of those books. They describe a lot of people, but those don't describe me. And I thought, this topic of childlessness, because think about it, if you're infertile, you don't have a child, or if you miscarried, you lost a child. So this topic of childlessness is broad enough that can be the umbrella, and a spoke can be infertility, miscarriage. And I thought there should be a book on this topic, and there wasn't. So I wrote one. Yeah.
If you look at the fact that part of the covenant relationship between your mother and father was to not have children, and we look at how God uses circumstances, will he use this for your advocacy for foster care and for adoption? Will he use this to help you touch others? And you say that infertility affects approximately 12% of the U.S. population. More than 1 in 10 couples struggle with infertility. We have another couple that we work with, the Cons, who have ministry in infertility. And you're right, we don't get a whole lot of pitches for books about longing for motherhood. But yet, it seems to be very important to God, because he introduces us to a number of barren women in the Bible, and they play key players. They are significant roles in the lineage of Messiah and in the lessons to be learned in the Bible in a time when it was considered a curse. Now, you came out of a political world where it was a mandate and then it was a curse. You've experienced all of the spectrum of the blessings and the curses to go along with this. And God's uniquely put you in this position to share your personal story about how you were birthed out of a mandate to replenish Romania. into a world where you learned as a young girl that you biologically, according to man, and I still put that caveat because God hasn't,
Right.
the I may be written, but the I hasn't been dotted. And it won't be dotted until God dots that I.
Right. Right.
So we don't know how that story ends. But what you've done is you said, instead of throwing myself in wallowing in pity, self-pity, I couldn't find what I was looking for, so I'm going to create something that's going to become a resource for those that are longing for motherhood. We're going to talk more about that after we take this break, but we're talking with Chelsea Patterson Sobolik, author of Longing for Motherhood, holding on to hope in the midst of childlessness. And this just is not about infertility. This is about childlessness.
Yeah.
The whole spectrum. As you said, one of the spokes of the wheel is infertility. Another spoke on the wheel is miscarriage. Another spoke on the wheel. As we go through all of this, we'll learn more about that after we take this short break. We'll be right back with Chelsea Patterson Sobolik to talk about Longing for Motherhood. Back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Chelsea Patterson Sobolik, author of Longing for Motherhood, Holding on to Hope in the Midst of Childlessness. Chelsea, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much.
Chelsea, you shared before the break about your frustration of going to the bookstore and not finding resources that addressed this infertility, childlessness, and all the related issues around that. You share your struggle and your diagnosis that determined through examination that you were not able to conceive, or if you could conceive, you could not carry to term. So you're now married. How was this conversation with your husband to be? Because you already knew, you had actually already written the manuscript for the book before you got married.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Ooh. So my husband and I were friends for a couple years before we started dating. And there's no guidebook for how to have those types of conversations, just because it's so rare to walk into a marriage knowing likely I'm not going to be able to have kids. So I felt like I was flying blind. Lots of prayer, lots of seeking wisdom and counsel from my pastor, from good friends on what that was going to look like. And I ended up sharing with Michael one night, and it's so funny because, and I don't know how the Lord did this, but I think the Lord because I hadn't shared with him before, but he told me, he's like, I had an inclination that might be something you're going to share with me sometime. And so the Lord had already been preparing his heart to receive the news. He did enter into a season of grieving and whatnot, but I mean, I went through a season of grieving as well. So, but he ultimately decided that he loved me more than the thought of having a biological child. And we got married in September. So it was definitely, there were a lot of hard conversations along the way because he did not grow up where adoption was. It was part of my world. I had wanted to adopt even before I knew I couldn't have kids. I wanted that to be part of our family. And he did not grow up with that part of his story. So I think he just had a lot to think about and consider, but ultimately ended on I love Chelsea more. So he's the best man I've ever met.
I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you.
You know, what's interesting is I'm sure that during those years of conversation had input into you writing the book, into realizing what people don't know, what people don't think, what people don't consider, what alternatives are available and resources are available to them that they never thought about. And so there's this there is this grief, there is this mourning, and there is this identification with the barrenness of the Bible, of it being a curse. How did you reconcile with your relationship with God? Because you said you were at a crossroads. You didn't know you wanted to go to Christian college, because did you have enough? You just got news, you know, you're a freshman in college, you get news that you're not going to, and now you're going to try to find a way to live a godly life. You work for the U.S. House of Representatives, for your congressman from the state of Kentucky, is it?
Arizona.
Arizona. I'm sorry, Arizona. So you have a vibrant life, but there's so many alternatives, and you're in a position to impact and get the ears of a lot of people in government to adoption policies and adoption tax credits and rebates and things like that, to encourage this problem or the solution to the problem. Did Michael come around to considering that one day you two might adopt?
Yes, absolutely. It was so interesting. And I think all these things are things you need to think through well before entering into that. But it was so interesting because we sat down and he said, Chelsea, I've been thinking, I've been praying, I've been talking to other people. And he said, I realize that it is so much more important for me as a dad, you as us as parents, to raise a child that reflects the heart of Christ. It doesn't matter if they look like us or not. Like, what's important in being godly parents is raising a child to look like Jesus, not like us.
Right.
And so, and that's what, I mean, I'm not a parent yet, but Lord willing, that's what we'll get to do one day, is raise a kid that looks like Jesus. But it was definitely a process. It was not overnight, but yeah.
What helped you, and in the book, and let's refer directly to the book, how did you go through your season of sorrow? What was it that you held on to as you began to wrestle with an inevitable truth?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Like I said earlier, I felt like I was at a crossroads of, am I going to still follow Christ? And it was a lot of dark nights. I felt lots of grief. It was interesting. And I'm speaking from my personal experience, but there were days I couldn't even go to Target because I'd see a pregnant woman and it would be too much. So I really went through probably about a year and a half of a really dark season, not only because I felt like I lost something. I lost the dream of natural parenthood, but I also was really wrestling through my identity as a woman of, if I can't have kids, am I second class? Am I less than in any way? So I was wrestling through all this, and I was also 19, so hormone city. But what I think really carried me through that season was, and this is God's grace, this is not Chelsea, this is by God's grace, but I turned to the scriptures and thought, okay, I'm going to see what's here in my darkest hour. And I tore apart the book of Psalms. And I love that in God's word, he gives us saints that have gone before us that have shared how they're actually feeling. I think it can be easy for Christians to not share how we're actually feeling. But if you look at David's life, one of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 13. And David's crying out to God and he's saying, how long, O Lord? How long are you going to let me suffer? How long am I going to feel forgotten? And I've if we're honest, everyone's felt that. We're all going to experience an unmet desire or a loss in some way. And all of us are going to feel those things. And so I love that we can turn to the scriptures and see people saying, I'm hurting, I'm suffering, I'm having a hard time. So we can see those saints before us. Then we can also turn our attention to our Savior and see that he knows what it feels like to grieve. And I love the story of Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus, because he knew he was about to raise him from the dead, but instead of being like, guys, stop crying, like, get over your grief, he entered into their pain with them, and he felt the intense sorrow. So I think one thing that helped me wrestle was just allowing myself to feel that sorrow, and knowing under all that sorrow that, I mean, God promises that we'll have trials. That's a promise. But under that, he promises never to leave or forsake us. So that really just pressing into getting to know who God was. And then also, I was reading in the scriptures, in the Gospels, where it talks about what it means to be a Christian. And Jesus said, if anyone would follow me, he would take up his cross and die and follow me. And for whatever reason, I may never know on the side of eternity, but childlessness is part of my cross to bear. But Jesus is worth it, and he's better than a child. He's better than any earthly gift I would ever get here. So those are just a few things that I've thought through and processed through and worked through that have helped me.
Well, you actually go much further than that, because you talk about not wasting your
Yeah.
childlessness.
Mm-hmm.
You're in this situation, this circumstance, because God's sovereign.
Yeah.
And in the sovereignty of God, he has allowed this to occur in your life, either by design or by allowing the circumstances to unfold, which would bring you here.
Yeah.
Which is part of how, can I trust Chelsea? Can I actually believe that if I take her through this season of barrenness, that she won't waste it, that she won't go through, she won't not go through, but she won't remain in a season of self-pity. She won't remain estranged from me. It's interesting that the passage that comes to mind is 2 Samuel 14:14. And in there, he's saying, like water falls to the ground and does not return, we all must die, but God devises those ways for those who are estranged from him to return. So here you are, you decide to go to a Christian university, you simultaneously find out you're not going to be able to have children. That explains some of the issues that you're having physically. And you make the decision you're going to return to the Christian college, and you make the decision you're going to continue to follow Jesus. Then you go out searching for answers, and you can't find them. No. So you turn to the scriptures, and now somewhere in you there has to be this question, Lord, did you orchestrate this so that I could be like what Joseph said to his brothers? What the enemies meant for evil, God will work for his good so that many will be saved. Is this my assignment? Is this my purpose? Is this my ministry and my mission? And if I don't do this, I know you'll pick somebody else.
Yeah. So
I'm going to go ahead and go through with this, no matter how much it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wrote this in the book, but I feel like I wrote the book in blood, not ink, because it really did hurt. So each page hurt quite a lot to write. It's been 8 years since I found out, so there's a scar, but writing it felt like opening a wound. But you're right, part of me didn't want to write this book, if I'm being honest. It would be easier if God picked someone else, but I really did feel a call for God to say, or God saying, share this journey, because I knew how alone I felt in my sorrow and in not seeing anyone else write or talk about this. And I felt so alone. And I thought, I never want anyone else to feel alone in this. And yes, everyone does need to press into the Lord and press into Christ in those moments. But we're not designed to live life siloed or on an island. We were designed to walk through life as a community and in our churches and in relationship with each other. So that was a big catalyst of, I don't want anyone to feel like they are the only ones walking through something like this. So that's, and even now, my biggest prayer is that this book will meet someone where they're at and remind them they're not by themselves or alone. And then this book is not the answer. I mean, it is not going to have every last answer in it. It's supposed to point people to the hope and healing in Christ. And my prayer is that that's what it does. But, it's so interesting. I have thought so often, like, Lord, I don't know if this is what the call on my life is. And I think we really do wrestle with, God, I want to know why you did this or whatnot. But as I've thought about it more over the years, when we tell God we want to know why he did this, we don't really, I feel like we don't really mean that. God could tell us why he did this. What we're really saying to God is, I want to know that you are still for me in the midst of this pain, and you are kind in the midst of this pain, and you see us and you know us, and answers aren't really what we're looking for. It's to know that God sees and knows us. So, and like I said, this might be God's, why the Lord allowed this in my life, but I will never have an answer on this side of eternity. So just trusting God. And like you said, stewarding our trials. We steward our finances, we steward our time. And I think that we can steward our trials to the glory of God and invite people into our stories and say, this is what God did for me. This is who I've come to know God as, and invite people into our suffering and into the hope we've had. So that's how I view stewarding trials, is getting to use them as road marks to point to the Lord.
You write in your book about how our communities can love us well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How to create within the church small groups or support groups or mentoring groups of those who have dealt with, and we're talking about healthily, successfully dealt with as being the mentors, but also being willing to support and to recognize that those who have miscarried, who may have been their only opportunity for conception, and the miscarriage and the resulting surgical corrections or whatever took place then remove the chance of ever being pregnant again, brings a whole set of PTSD and depression and anxiety and self-loathing and anger and grief and so many different things that are very similar to other things but are not the same, because there's one thing that I can't be empathetic about with you, is being barren.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just I can't. I can relate to your story, but I can't feel what you feel. Only another woman can
Right.
feel what you feel.
Yeah.
So what can our churches do? And what do you recommend? And what resources have you provided out there to help others get these things going?
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's such an important one. I'm going to zoom back to when I first started sharing with friends about where I was. And I want to be very gentle. I don't want to be too harsh, but I had some bad responses. Several friends said, well, it's okay. You can just adopt. Or um, you shouldn't be too upset because you wanted to adopt anyways. And while that's factually true, they weren't giving me the space to grieve before accepting, yes, I can adopt. Something else that I encountered was people kind of just quoting a Bible verse, like, oh, it's all going to work out in the end, you'll be fine, or like, it's going to be okay. God has a plan and all these things. And then a week later, when I still was hurting, they would truly be at a loss of words of why I was still hurting, because they just given me a Bible verse and that should fix everything. And I think something churches can do, and again, I want to be very gentle, but I think something we can learn to do better is to create room for people that are grieving. And I don't think we should stay in grief forever, but there is a period where it's okay to grieve. And that verse in Romans where it says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. We don't take that second part seriously enough, I don't think. I don't think we create safe spaces or, honestly, like, grief makes us uncomfortable. Like, we want to fix something or have a quick solution or something to say. And it makes us uncomfortable because we don't know what God is doing in it, and we can't heal someone's heart. So I think what churches and pastors and small groups can do is just creating safe spaces to say, I can't imagine what that feels like, and I'm not going to give you an answer of why this is happening, but I'm going to sit with you while you're grieving. I'm going to bring you dinner on Mother's Day because I know that could be a hard day for you, or just learning to care for people in that. And it's so interesting. You're saying you can't empathize, but you can sit and weep with someone. The Bible doesn't say weep with those who weep only if you know exactly that circumstance.
Right. Yeah, I can certainly sympathize.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I certainly can extend compassion to you. And I should be sensitive that Mother's Day,
it's a hard one. Yeah.
It never would occur to me for someone who is childless that Mother's Day would be a difficult day for them. That seems so obvious, but until you said it, I never had that thought. It's not an original thought in my brain. To make that connection. And you do that in the book. You also have a final note in the book, and we've got about 2 minutes, and I'd like you to share, if you would, your final note to your audience.
Yeah, I don't have the book in front of me.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be from the book, from your heart.
Perfect. Okay, I was like, oh, I don't. My final word to anyone that's listening, whether they are childless, they have 12 children, they're somewhere in between on this journey, is that God is present. And I mentioned this earlier, we're all going to have disappointments in life. That's not unique to someone struggling with childlessness. And we can put our arms around each other and walk towards heaven together. So just remember, wherever you are, that God sees you, He loves you, He is for you. He is working all things for good, and your trial has an expiration date, and that is the day you reach heaven. He promises to wipe away all our tears. So That is my final word to anyone listening.
With Chelsea, you have been such a delight sharing your
Thank you.
story, longing for motherhood, holding on to hope in the midst of childlessness. Chelsea Patterson Sobolik. You can go to our website, ignitingnation.com, click on Books and Media, and get a copy for yourself. You may have a friend, you may have a child, you may be struggling with this yourself. An outstanding resource, firsthand personal perspective, not hypothetical, not theoretical, but practical and real, straight from the heart, as Chelsea says, written in the blood of her own story and her own journey. Chelsea, thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.